Use a little bit of the shimmer in here to give some sparkles as well. Now you can just tip your shimmers in, but I find you get too much when you do that. So I'm just going to take a little bit on the end of the stick. That's probably too much anyway, but just to get a tiny bit of shimmers. And I'm going to add a little bit of the clear soap. The shimmers always seem to show up better in a clear soap, but you can use it in an opaque if you wish to. Okay, I'll mix it up with the same stick so that the colours and the fragrances are all mixed through, and I'll give you a close-up of that one in a little bit once it's set. I don't know if you'll pick it up from that far away, but you can see it's got some lovely shimmers. There's your Barbie soap. Now, if you had have made that in a really pretty mould, it would just look fantastic. These are the soaps that you'll pay a fortune for if you buy them in commercial stores. So let's do our second one. This is going to be our buttermilk soap. Now, I don't want to add colours. Personally, I like buttermilk soap white. So I'm going to leave it white, but I want it to smell nice. So I'm going to use essential oil blend here, our passion blend, which is a blend of Lang Lang, sandalwood and patchouli. This is a really nice scent for the men as well. They seem to like it. In choosing your fragrances, if you're making soap for men, they tend to not like the floral soaps so much, maybe not the rose and the jasmine smells. But if you're going into some of the earthier smells like Lang Lang, sandalwood, cinnamon, lemon, tangerine, they're all really nice scents for the men as well. I'm going to put a little bit of the buttermilk. I'll use the same stick. A little bit of the buttermilk paste into the cup. And for this one, I'm going to use the opaque soap. Not for any particular reason, just because I really like it. And it's all setting in my ladle, but we'll still be able to get enough to use it. Pour it into the mould. And just mix it through really, really well, because otherwise you'll get pockets that are just buttermilk rather than soap, and when you unmould it they'll make holes and they won't look so good. So there's your little sample of your buttermilk soap, which is going to be really nice and moisturising on the skin. Now, as I made that one, I spilt it all over my finger, but it's slightly warm, but it doesn't burn and it's not hot. It's a little bit lower than candle wax, so if the children want to make this and they slop it on themselves, it doesn't really matter. So long as you haven't got it too hot, it should be okay. So this is your basics of your melt and pour soap. You melt your soap, whether you use the opaque or the transparent soap. You choose your colours, whether you use food dyes or your pigment colours, which I always prefer to use for soap making. Then you add your fragrances. I only use pure essential oils or your nature identical fragrant oils. Then you add your botanicals and additives. So if you wanted to add some leaves or some buttermilk or some shimmers into that to give you special effects. Now, in working with the buttermilk, you can use normal milk powder. I don't recommend made-up milk. It doesn't seem to last very long. If you wanted to use cow milk and you use full cream milk powder, it goes rancid reasonably quickly, so it's not recommended. If you wanted to use a skim milk powder, it will last a bit longer, perhaps 6 months, but you'd need to check it. The buttermilk does seem to last longer than that, but you could experiment for yourself and have a play with those ones. And then you can just mix up your botanicals or your milk powders or your shimmers or whatever you're putting into your soap, mix it up. You could pour it directly into your soap tray as we discussed if you wanted to, and then unmould those as individual soaps. If you wanted to use perhaps some household things you might have around for moulds, let's say you don't have moulds and you want to make these up, you can use basic things you might find around the house. If you've got a cake tray or you've got a milk carton, now remembering that you can't slice the opaque soap very easily. It won't slice nicely necessarily. So if you're wanting to use the opaque soap, you'd have to make it in individual trays. Maybe you could make it in patty pans if you wanted to and just peel the paper off, or if you had a patty pan tray. Or if you had a milk carton and you wanted to use the clear soap, which you can cut, then you'd mix up your colours and fragrances, whatever else you needed into it, pour it into your milk carton, let it set. Once it's set, peel your milk carton off from your block of soap. You'd have about 1 litre in there, slice it up into pieces, and you'd have all your bars of soap, which you could then individually shrink wrap, or you could put them in cellophane plastic bags that you'll pick up. eBay's great to get those sort of things cheaply, or you can pick them up at party supply stores for about 1 cent to 2 cents each. So one of my favourite questions in soap making is, if I buy a kilo of soap, how many soaps do I get? And the short answer to that is you're going to get a kilo of soaps, depending on the size of your mould. So to give you an idea, these two little soaps that I have here, these are around about 35 to 40 gram soaps. So something like that, you're going to get about 22 to 25 cakes of soap out of a kilo of soap. If you go into a larger soap like this sort of size, this one is probably around about 110 grams. So you're going to get about 10 of those from a kilo of soap. So it really does depend on the size of the soap that you're making. With these soap tray soaps, I didn't fill them right up to the top. The soap tray came to about here and I only half filled them. Still decent size for a cake of soap. That probably weighs about 55 grams. So you'd get about 18 to 20 of those out of a kilo of soap. So in summary for your soap making, there's a lot more we can discuss, and we will have a look at some soap art workshops a little further on. But you melt down your soap, you add your colours, you add your fragrances, you add your botanicals, you pour it into a mould, whether you use a soap tray, whether you use a milk carton, whatever you'd like to do, and let it set. Don't put it in the freezer. Don't get it too hot, don't get it too cold. Room temperature is perfect to let it set. How do you know when it's ready to come out of the mould? You feel it and it's not warm, it's gone cold, and it will come away from the sides of the mould, and that's about it. This is one of those activities that you can have set up in 10 minutes, and it's perfect for school holidays. If the children want to make gifts for mum, at the end of it, mum doesn't have more 1-inch ceramic cups that she's got sitting around that she's meant to drink tea out of. She's got actually soap that she can use. Lovely gifts for grandmas if the kids say, I made this for you myself, grandma. Lovely items that you can actually use. So therefore, it's not a craft hobby that you're just wasting money on, because it's creating something that you would have to purchase for everyday use anyway. And it's perfectly safe with a bit of supervision over the heated areas that children could do it. It can be a really fun activity after school or on school holidays.